Hey everyone, sorry I'm late. Also, my video is not working. I may need a little minute. Yeah, my video is totally not going to work. So never mind, I will turn it off. I think, so I was looking at the agenda earlier on, and thank you, David, posting the link in the doc there. Sorry, in the chat. I think we just have one item today, and Mike, you could get us started if you can take us away.
Sure. Well, sure. Actually, I mean, before we get started, is there anybody sort of new to the group who maybe wants to introduce themselves?
Oh, thank you. Yes, good reminder. Apologies.
Me, I am Caroline Cameron. I work in supply chain security at IBM, and I actually work with Melba, who's on the call.
I am Andrew McNamara. I used to be a student around Will and at NC State, but I've been interested in usable privacy and security for a bit. So I'm at Red Hat.
Cool. Glad to have new folks aboard. Anybody else? Okay. So yeah, the only thing I wanted to just kind of open up a conversation topic, just because I've been hearing that from a few folks from the new, I believe, end user working group, that there's interest in starting sort of a taxonomy on a few different things. And one of the things that they were talking about was a supply chain security taxonomy. And I had actually heard it when I was in a different community meeting in a different outside of the OpenSSF. So wanted to know if there was folks who had some background on any of that. Once again, I know that a lot of the we're still sort of working through some of the communication and some of that stuff, but it was just sort of a surprise to a few of us who I think were working on similar things within either Salsa or similar sorts of groups already. David?
Yeah. So this has actually been raised up at the OpenSSF TAC. And the TAC has not done anything about this, but there have been discussions about adopting a particular document. I've just put a link in the chat: taxonomy of attacks on open source software supply chain attacks, where this may come as a shocker, but every once in a while the academics do something that when you hear about what they did, you go, oh my gosh, what a sensible thing for an academic to do. So they went out and tried to identify every single open source supply chain attack that they could find. And then they put them into categories, and they have a taxonomy. And I mean, I've looked it over. It's pretty good, I think. Now, as soon as somebody else looks at it, they may go, "Oh man, you're wrong. Here's the 20 ways it's terrible." But I think that it's a pretty decent approach. I know that MITRE has separately done some work. I don't have a link offhand. But now, I mean, they're specifically focusing on open source supply chain attacks, although of course some of these attacks are not unique to open source software, but that's understandable. But as I said, the TAC has not done that at this point, but that's at least up for discussion, because obviously it's helpful to have the same terms, and know if you're trying to counterattacks, know which ones you're countering and which ones you aren't. Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's an attack taxonomy. Is that the suggestion that's being? I mean, I know that's what it literally is.
That's right. That is, yeah, yeah, that's right. Because, I mean, it is for the attacks. That said, you would, I think it's quite useful for defenders, because the idea is that you would, if you want to categorize how good are your defenses, the answer would be, well, it counters this and this. It helps a little bit against that. That's not a complete countermeasure, and it doesn't do anything for these others.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that definitely helps out a lot, because I think there was also when originally introduced, there was some confusion as to like whether that taxonomy was going to become something like an ontology about how to define the terms around supply chain security. This seems to be more of just, hey, different categories around types of attacks and things like that, and how to sort of, let's say, mitigate some of that. Like, I have the PDF up and just sort of reading through, but things like, reproducible build, isolation, and those sorts of things, which are, safeguards. Okay, cool. Yeah. I think this is useful. I think is there anything from you think that from like this group's end on ways to contribute or provide feedback?
I mean, it's a
Well,
signed off. It's a paper. I don't think we get to change
oh,
the paper.
no. I don't mean that, because so Krob and Jonathan Meadows and a few folks from the end user group had said there's work around what they're calling the hold on, if you look at the supply chain integrity group from Slack from last week, to start a collaboration around this problem, the supply chain taxonomy. Jay, actually, is Jay on? Do you have any? I think you were working on some of that with some of those folks.
Jay,
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so the end users working group working on the taxonomy, but there's we're actively pushing to try to bring a few of the working groups in, including the best practices, to get on one sheet of music. I mean, like that's the long and short of it. To work on the taxonomy and the silo in the OpenSSF is that should be a non-starter, because we each are working on different initiatives that require the same type of terms, definitions, and everything else. Even reference architectures, depending upon what we're looking at. But in order to properly do, and in order to properly do what we're attempting to do in the diagrammer society, for instance, creating different models, creating different images, or different graphics, etc. Those all need to look the same. I mean, they need to read the same contextually. And in order to do that, we all need to be on the same sheet of music across all the different working groups, the different SIGs underneath, and the different projects that are being worked on. So yeah, I'm inside of each working group saying the same thing. Let's come together. Maybe this should be, dare I say, this should be a subcommittee underneath the Diagrammer Society to talk about, bring in these different things, talk about them, work them up into the work the Diagrammer Society doing, and then let that funnel out to the working groups as foundational items that are used to create or help create these different frameworks, these different builds, and work in these different projects. I just threw something new out right now, Arno. Arno will look at that. I just threw something new. I'm spitballing. But Mike, that's something that I'm thinking about as I talk right now, and of course, I'll leave that on the table here for the good of the order. Yes, I can. Give me 1 second.
So,
And of
so
course,
yeah, okay.
MITRE
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, MITRE also has things like attack, and although it's a different kind of thing.
That's that. I just in the chat. I just put the notes document, the notes and agenda document for the Diagrammer Society. So that should have the the links to the Zoom and the dates and times. All the stuff that our notes pages usually have. But I put it up there in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. I want to copy that into the notes because, as you know, the big risk is they disappear after the call.
Yeah.
Ah. Maybe it's just as well because then it forces us to do that and put it all in one place.
Cool. And just wanted to kind of throw out there, yeah, I think I'm definitely on board with less reinventing the wheel. Like if somebody else has done all the work around a taxonomy and we could just adopt it, or we can, just sort of provide whatever, hey, we're largely adopting this with these key differences, just because, we have a slightly different viewpoint. I think that is super useful as opposed to spinning up a whole other work stream around that. I also know that there's some folks working throughout a few of the different groups just across the open source community around. So that's like the taxonomy, but I also know that there's a few folks who are working on the idea of sort of like an ontology so that folks can start to, in the very least, if they don't adopt common terms, there is some way of like mapping those mapping their terms to common terms, like things like digest versus hash versus checksum, that kind of thing. And so I believe there's some folks in the Intodo side, in the CNCF, and a few other places that are starting to try and build out some of those things so that when different tools and specifications are spun up, it becomes easier to understand, when this thing says digest, it's the same as when this thing says hash, largely, or whatever. David?
Yeah, just a real quick note. At the risk of putting poor Jay on the spot here. So the S2C2F has in its front matter actually a really nice list of here are the things they're worried about, and then mapping back to kind of show here's what we're suggesting, and then this is why. I don't know if anybody's gonna cross check between that and some of these other things like the like that archive paper, but I mean that might be a useful thing to do. Now, a whole lot of these things focused on taxonomy, on categorizing the attacks as opposed to the defenses. I'll be honest, I'm not. I think trying to take a taxonomy of the defenses is harder. Uh, so, and again, and I think it's actually easier to categorize off the defenses, but done.
Okay, anything more on this before we move on?
So I think the takeaway here is just to, I guess, work with the end user group and kind of, that seems, does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Well, I guess the question is, are they? I would working with them was always good, but I would encourage them to look at what's been done first, see if they can use that. If there's a problem with that, then let's figure out what the problem is and how to fix that. But I always hate to reinvent the wheel.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, Melba, salsa positioning update. Over to you.
Thanks, Isaac. A couple things. The salsa spec pre-RFC draft is out in a PR. If you have been actively engaged for the 1.0 draft, it would be great to have people comment on it. If you don't have history with it, it may be too much. You might want to wait for the RFC, but I'm trying to get folks to try to look at that issue 606 to make sure that we can progress. We're trying to aim for end of week. I'm not sure that that's achievable, but it's a target that we're trying to go for. Additionally, there was a supply chain integrity working group panel that was submitted for Open Source Summit North America. It's labeled ketchup, mustard, and relish of supply chain security. So I like to thank Michelle, if she's not on, for that title. That was a fantastic title. So yeah, we're hoping it gets accepted, and it's going to have representation from the three groups, Salsa, Fresca, and then S2C2F. And with that said, I've been working on starting a landing page for Salsa on the OpenSSF page. It was something that was recommended to me. And Jay brought up a great idea. It's like, why don't we have a supply chain integrity working group page? And then from that page, we have the sub communities. And I think that's a great idea because there's a 10-point mobilization plan. And that is one of the main reasons why we are doing what we are doing. There is like a tile that kind of flips over that says supply chain security, and you flip it over, it flips over and it says a little description. Why not have a link from that to this page to get all the information about what we're doing, how it fits into the overall picture of that 10-point mobilization plan? And then obviously Isaac and Jay, I know we were working on that diagram of how does all of this link together, Fresca, S2C2F, and Salsa. So not sure about the thoughts on that. I know there was an argument against a working group page because there's already a link and that communities are the main focus. But I think it would be a better idea if we were to do the SCI working group page instead with the sub pages.
I think it's a great idea, Melba. I'm super supportive. And I love the continued trajectory of up-leveling salsa positioning into SCI positioning that goes along with this, that kind of looking broadly at that working group is how do we position the solutions we have within the SCI problem space, essentially. Yeah, I think a landing page for that on OpenSSF.org would be awesome. I just see Arnaud has put in the SIG store example. Yeah, yes. I can see this working really well for SCI.
Okay. Does anybody object to that concept of having a working group main page versus a community main page, right? Each community would have their own, but it really should be focused on the whole supply chain integrity. I don't see any thumbs down. I don't see objections. Okay. And then the reason why I put positioning up leveling is because I was asked by the specification group what the status of that was, if we were going to stay the same or if we were going to be up leveled, and I didn't really have an answer for them. And so that's the only reason why that's there.
So I think, I mean, I continue to think it's a good idea. I think that we have meatier problems to tackle at the SCI level positioning wise than Salsa, and I think that Salsa would be a reasonable subset of that, and particularly as we land Salsa 1.0, we can position it very clearly within the SCI space. I want to recognize that you have constraints on your time, Melba, like we all do, and so I know that there's just, I think I tend to have the instinct is I'd rather have a narrower scope and do things well than have a broader scope and kind of like feel spread very thin. And so if that's your instinct, certainly I appreciate that. And so really it's it's going to be down to you and your comfort level in finding volunteers to help drive that and to help kind of put it together. And how do you feel about that broader scope? I mean, I should say that it feels like you're de facto almost doing that in all but name already anyway. And so it could just be the matter of, hey, we rename salsa positioning to SCI positioning, and you expand by name into where you already are de facto.
Yeah, I think I don't think it was in this meeting. It might have been in the spec meeting. I said, as long as I have co-leads from Fresca and S2C2F, I'm game. But I can't talk to those two, right? So I need co-leads to represent that, right? Because without it, it's going to fail. So, and I think I got agreement from Jay and Mike. Sorry to put you on the spot. That they would help co-lead that positioning group if it were up-leveled. But I'll need to get agreement again, just in case I misunderstood.
I'm in, Melba. I'm in right here. I'm in.
Not sure about you, Mike.
Let me check my schedule. I mean, conceptually I'm in.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna it sounds to me like, just to close this one out, it sounds to me like we have agreement in principle, that this is something that we want to do. Agreement in principle that with co-leads, Melba, you'll be able to take on this larger scope within that SCI positioning scope. And I think we need to look at putting this into practice. What does it mean in terms of changing the name? Do we need a new meeting schedule? We need to accommodate Mike's schedule and so on. But in principle, it sounds like we're all agreed that this is the right move.
You know what, we made the Mike, Melba, and I, we both attend the current salsa positioning meeting, and I know that we were working on a new time for that. I say the new time that we agreed on, and I want to say it's Tuesday, but a little bit earlier. We could take that new time, put the new name on it, and let's continue on, because we're all there anyway.
Do we need to get approval from the TAC to up level?
I think as a process matter, I would defer to David to help give us guidance on this.
I'm not sure how to answer the question. I mean, as long as you're doing within your working group the things the working group's supposed to do, generally you don't need to ask Mother May I. Coordination between the working groups, I mean, you don't need to ask permission to coordinate, but you certainly can ask that TAC to help you out.
Yeah, I'm asking because S2C2F, I know it was a Microsoft thing that was, donated to OpenSSF, but they got permission to be under the supply chain integrity working group, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the only reason why.
Not so much permission. I mean, not so much. I mean, Jay was painfully from it. It was really more of a question of where does it go, because I think lots of people, including Jay, were trying to figure that out. And I think they were encouraging to put it here primarily to help make sure that it and salsa work together and not apart. But each working group, frankly, I mean, that S2C2F has all sorts of awesome stuff. Several working groups said, "Oh, that's awesome. We'd love to have it be part of it." So it certainly wasn't a matter of people not liking it.
Got it.
So again, and as far as accepting submissions in, basically a working group has to say yes, and if it's pre-existing, there's some small ceremony, primarily just to protect everybody else, to make sure that if it comes in, that there's no weird copyright or trademark or other issues that cause troubles. We usually don't have those problems, but you don't want to have them. So
makes sense.
Yeah, I think from a working group standpoint, I mean, it's as simple as taking the sub SIGs, which salsa positioning is, and then taking that and just moving those in. I think that's a working group decision. I think the working group itself can make that decision unto itself, the same way the working group forms the SIGs in general. I don't know that that there's the permission is to bring that. Where does that particular thing, the initiative, sit in the OpenSSF? Now that can be decided, but I think once it's there, how the working group moves, ebbs and flows, I think that's a working group decision.
Yeah.
So
Now-
I would,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, David, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I may have misunderstood the term up level because if it's just, hey, within the working group, I mean, here we are. We decide. If you mean by like putting it on the OpenSSF website and making a big pitch for it, okay, I see a shaking of heads of no. I mean, that's a, hey, please do this. You know, and, we can talk about that, but if you want to put something on the website, we're always excited to hear about new stuff to put on the website.
So I think I know. Sorry, I'll let you go in just 1 minute.
All
It
right.
sounds to me like there's maybe two threads we need to pull on here. One is the governance side of things, which we'll need to make sure we update the charter and that we go through the right process for doing that, because this is an expansion in charter scope. I tend to agree with David that like we don't need to go down the Mother May I thing at this level within OpenSSF. So I think if there's the governance side we take care of with the charter and making sure that we go through the right process to change that, and then there's the mechanical side of we need the meetings renamed, we need the Slack channel renamed, we need the mailing list renamed, and so on. And that's probably an OpenSSF operations team that can help us with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you are changing like the charter of what the scope of the group is, you do need to get an okay with that with the TAC. Generally, they're going to be fine with it as long as it's reasonable. Which, frankly, I would be surprised if it's anything other than reasonable. But that's one of the few things where you do need to say, "Hey, TAC, we want to change our charter from this to that." To be honest, it's already a bit of a challenge. And Jay, again, has experienced this firsthand. These groups were big categories, but there's more than little overlap between them. And sometimes something just, it easily fits in multiples of them. But the notion was trying to make it so there's some swim lanes so that people aren't bumping into each other constantly. And I see Arno has his hand up.
Yeah, no, but actually, I think you pretty much answered the question the way I wanted to answer. Yeah, if you want to change the charter, you would have to inform the TAC and get their okay. If it's reasonable, there is no reason to think the TAC would say, hell no. So it's a formality, really, but yeah, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, if I mean, it's not quite a formality. It's just most of the times it'd be formality. And I'm sorry, I just realized that Melba's hands up. So go ahead, Melba.
Yeah, you mentioned the charter, right? For SCI, we are updating the charter. So I know we're trying to wrap that up, but do we have a target on when we will present that charter to the TAC?
So if you
supply chain
ask me,
integrity.
I think the TAC has been pretty lenient in trying to enforce this, and the request to get charters set up, defined for every working group was done a long time ago, and the TAC has not really been chasing groups, making sure they have done so.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, so well, I noticed Brian dropped off, but I was actually going to say one of the other things that I think would be useful in sort of some of the interaction here is also, and I know we brought it up previously, is like as new directions generally for OpenSSF get like sort of voted on by the governing board, it would be useful to better understand how does that cascade down to the working group so that we have an understanding of, hey, like, yes, last year the general direction was to focus on these things, and then this year the focus should be on these other things. That would be useful just to kind of help us as we go through to make sure that nothing we're doing in our charter or otherwise is sort of completely contradict. Obviously, there's going to be some discrepancies, but doesn't completely contradict the guidance coming from the governing board.
I don't have anything else, Isaac.
Okay, well, we've completed the agenda. I think we've got some, certainly in terms of this, the document at the bottom, the the charter of the SEI working group. I will figure out what we need to do in terms of presentation to the TAC, and that we're aligned there. I think we're agreed in principle. With the up leveling, we need to work out the mechanics on the governance and then the mechanics side, and then. We've got some follow-up to do in the end users group around taxonomy. And with that, I can give everyone 27 minutes back, and across a dozen people, that's like several hours of person calendar time freed up. Look at Jay, he's thrilled. My recommendation, as always, when finishing meetings early, is you're not allowed to just hang up and sit at your computer and do email and just turn Windows and do something else. You've got to stand up, stretch your legs, pet a cat, get a glass of water, get some fresh air, maybe say hello to other people that are around you and so on, and then you can get back to work. These are the rules. I don't make them up. I'm just here to remind you of them. Thank you, everyone. I will see you all soon, and in Slack and so on. And I hope you're all sharing my excitement for Salsa 1.0. We are tantalizingly close now, mere days and weeks away. So do take a look at the issue which Melba posted, and get ready for the release candidate of that in the very near term. Thanks all.
All right. It's a pleasure. I'm sticking on for a moment because I want to make sure that some of the chat notes get into, chat discussions get into our notes. It's okay if it has it twice. What I'm worried about is having them 0 times. All right, I think I've got them all. Hopefully I do. Okay. Thank you, everybody.